I want to thank the chairman and appreciate Senator Booker's comments as well. And it strikes me, though, in hearing your answers, it makes sense that this isn't going to just be a government function, because government isn't particularly well at some of these updated use of technology. And so I think engaging the private sector, engaging NGOs and others to help us do that, and we can provide the support for that, but I think that would be great to establish those partnerships to be able to make that happen. I was very interested in reading in your testimony, especially Mr. Bergen, about women, that there seems to be an attraction for young women that they're recruiting with more than, I think, a historical basis to ISIS. And can you talk to me about that? And it seems to me that as I look at some of these uses on social media, they almost romanticize what is happening over in Iraq and Syria, and what these women who might want to either join or, I guess, connect themselves in the U.S. or in some other Western country with ISIS. And so it strikes me that the more we can get the truth out, also, whether it's embedding reporters or what's really the conditions are. I know it's very dangerous, so that's challenging. But however we can get the truth out about what's really happening on the ground in the caliphate, that this isn't some kind of romantic endeavor that you're probably traveling to or asking to engage in. So I wanted to get thoughts on how we address this with women.
Well, that's right, Senator. So 20% of the sample we looked at from the United States are women, and about 10% overall from the West are women, which is unprecedented. So, and why are they going? They've been told it's the perfect society. They may well meet their perfect marriage partner. A lot of these are very young. The average age is 19. So, but how do we contest that? I think you're exactly right. People like Mubin Sheikh, and who's, it's disillusioned former militants who can actually speak the truth about what's happening and amplifying their voices. That's by far the most effective thing we can do. So it's finding those people, and there are already people coming back who, we saw this in the Minnesota case, Senator Johnson, when people started saying, well, wait a minute, Shabab is not the promised land, but it took 2 or 3 years before the message, and J.M. Berger, I'm sure, can amplify on this. But so it's going to take. But we're at the point where there are enough bad stories coming out. I think that that's a reasonable kind of idea, which is amplifying the voices of disillusioned militants.
Yeah, I think when we're looking at trying to undermine ISIS's messaging, one problem we have is that the information we have that does undermine their projection of strength of this utopian society is mostly eyewitness testimony from defectors. And that's not as compelling as photographs, video, and audio. And so, one of the things that I proposed is that in as much as we can deploy intelligence assets to get pictures of what's going on in these areas, intercepted communications, things that are much more gripping and much more compelling, instead of just one person's story, which is easy for a radical to dismiss because a radical is already convinced that they have the right idea anyway.
If I could jump in, there is on the flip side of this, is a wonderful site called Silently Slaughtering Raqqa, which is a Twitter feed of what's really going on in Raqqa. There are pictures of bread lines. They're saying, right, hey, the electricity is only on for 3 hours a day. So the point is that there is an alternative universe on social media that's portraying what's really happening that exists, and we should understand and know about.
Absolutely, and we should promote it and encourage people to see what really is happening. Because I think there is sort of a romanticized view being pushed out there that's attractive to people. I wanted to get your thoughts, all of you, on the leader of ISIS, al-Baghdadi, and he seems to have, using social media, using information to put out a certain image of himself that is not line up with the truth. And so what's your thought on the leader? Now, I understand we take out a leader and then another leader can follow, but he seems to have portrayed himself in a certain way. And what thoughts do you have for us to try to undermine the leadership to show that they're not really who they purport to be?
So I think Baghdadi's kind of an interesting figure in this context. In some ways, he's kind of an empty suit or a Rorschach test. He has a basic biography, which is carefully calculated to support the legitimacy of naming him caliph. We know a little bit more about him through independent reporting, but the image that he projects is really somebody who appears rarely, who speaks in jihadist platitudes, and as such, he is somewhat replaceable. You can bring your expectations to who he is and understand him in the context that you want. He doesn't have the same powerful cult of personality that somebody like Osama bin Laden did. He is replaceable, and I would assume that ISIS has a plan for succession because they do have to meet certain criteria to replace a caliph. It's not like Al-Qaeda where you can just give the guy who has the most seniority the job. And he may be an important strategic thinker in the group. I mean, there's some reason to think that. So replacing him may undercut their ability to operate, but it may not.
I think we touched on this earlier, but how important in all this context is it that we, thinking about what ISIS is doing actually on the ground and trying to establish this caliphate in Iraq and Syria? I serve on the Armed Services Committee as well, that we continue to, work with our partners there to actually diminish their capacity, because I think I heard one of you say that the fact that they control territory gives them a greater ability to recruit because it shows their legitimacy. And the more we can, so it's almost like we have to be addressing this on all fronts, it seems.
I think the short answer is yes to that.
One element of this that I would just bring up, because we've talked a lot about how their loss of territory would undermine their recruiting, and it would. But ISIS is also an apocalyptic millenarian group, and traditionally what happens with groups like this is when the prophecies that they are fulfilling turn out not to be correct, they will often double down on violence. So ISIS could lose its territory, we could undercut its recruiting, but we could see very disastrous secondary effects to that.
We've seen that with Al-Qaeda.
We've seen it with Al-Shabaab, I would say,
And
and Al-Shabaab doesn't have the same platform of prophecy that ISIS has built itself on. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you.